Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. We've got a new company to introduce to you today in Abitibi Metals. And why I like Abitibi Metals is they tick off three boxes that I always look for. One is they're in copper, it's high grade, and it's in Quebec. I love Quebec. It's one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world. And when you have a high grade copper project, that has a way of fixing problems compared to a low grade deposit. And so I've got John Duluth on the channel today to tell us about Abitibi. How's it going, John?
Great. I appreciate you having me.
Well, I wanted to start out, John, with your history. You have a family history in the mining business. So why don't we get into that before we start on the project?
Yeah, so so I'm part of a family office that's diversified across the airline, real estate, and mining space, and I lead the mining sector of our or section of our family office. So really, we've been in mining for about 25 years, largely privately. And when I say privately, we've had roughly $1 million annual flow through budget for a while that we use to develop assets privately. Is sort of a prospect generator model. And through that, we were board members, strategic financiers, and supportive shareholders and vendors of various juniors over that period of time. But what we noticed about in 2016, after hitting a few, should I say, lifestyle companies that we put our time and capital and recommendations behind, but then we were burnt alongside our fellow investors. Instead of going through that again, we decided to incorporate a company that we brought public in 2020, which was initially named Gold Seek Resources, that is now Abitibi Metals. But really to put our capital and expertise behind a vehicle that we pride ourselves in having very strong capital management, which I think is largely lacked in the junior space, but also leveraging our contacts to acquire what we believe is a world-class opportunity in the B26 deposit, as you mentioned, a high-grade polymetallic copper deposit with also strong zinc, gold, and silver credits. So it's a very, very rare opportunity to find, and that's why we're really excited with the opportunity and I think we're at the early stages of building a really serious company, and now one of the most active companies in Quebec. So we've grown the team. I tip my hat to all of my team members for scaling up from a small junior to being one of the most active companies in Quebec within 5 months period of time. So they've done an excellent job, and I think it's just the start of what will be a very exciting story.
Now, has your family business been in mainly focused in Quebec?
So our mining sector has focused 75% in Quebec, 25% in Ontario. But I'll tell you, even today, we're focused on building a company specifically in Quebec. We think it is the best mining jurisdiction in all of Canada. Government support, whether that's permitting, financial support through refunds on hard money spent in the province, the best flow through tax credits out of any province, which has helped allow us raise $50 million of charity flow through at the largest delta in Canada, minimizing the dilution to Abitibi, but also allowing our strategic shareholders that are taking the back end to get strong pricing, really aligning themselves as partners, and really strong support of First Nations partnerships. So pick again First Nations who were partnered with at the B26 deposit. Is a very mature First Nations group, and they know the benefit that mining can have on the community. So they have very strong trades that we work with. They have a very strong technical group that we hope to welcome to the site next month to show the progressions and how strong we're operating, minimizing our footprint at B26. So really, I would happy to debate anyone that Quebec is the strongest jurisdiction in Canada, and we're very happy with the opportunity that we do have there.
Well, you won't get an argument from me about that because I've had very good success. Malartic I picked that company really early in its development. My friend Andre Goumond at Virginia. I've only picked a few companies, but they've all been fantastic success stories. And you touched my heart a little bit there because my father is Indigenous First Nations, and in Quebec, it's Cree, and that's what my
Mhm.
father is as well. And I've often said to people that I don't really think that the mining industry utilizes the First Nations the way that they could. I give an example of my great grandfather. He had a trap line for 50 years. And if you had gone to him and said, "Have you ever seen a piece of rock like this?" If he had, he would take you to the exact spot where that was from. And
Mhm.
so I really believe that the indigenous youth of the country have inherent abilities to be prospectors and miners. And sometimes all it takes is, a guy like me who's spent 30 years in the mining business. I've made a career in this business, and a lot of it has to do with using some of those inherent skills that I have. So I'm glad to hear that you have a good relationship. Is my friend Matthew Kuncum involved at all?
I haven't had the opportunity to meet him yet, but no, it's a very, very strong group. We and the one thing that we are lacking is young people in the industry. So we are hoping to have the opportunity to work with both the First Nations uh, band members, but also just the younger people in general to provide training opportunities because really my core team at site, they're all older. Like my foreman is 68 years old. When he retires, I'm in trouble. So really, mining has been out of favor for a while, and it's kind of had a bad rep in terms of the ESG world. But I think at the end of the day, I think people are realizing how many parts of our lives are dependent on mining. Everything
Everything.
is dependent on mining, but it's the groups that are able to do it responsibly that I think are going to be able to stand out in this market. Because really, at Abitibi and B26, we don't view this as just an exploration story. We view this as a world-class potential asset that has a chance to be developed. So we're looking at our end goal and working backwards and building strong partnerships is part of how we're going to be able to have this saleable to a major and having all stakeholder collective input today is going to allow us to facilitate that tomorrow. And I think too many companies are short-sighted in that, but really bringing all those pieces together is going to result in us having success at the company.
Well, if you ever need someone to help promote getting some of those Indigenous youth, just give me a call. I'll get on a Zoom and try to promote them into becoming mining people. You got this are the option you got is from Soquim, and
Yeah.
they are one of the Quebec institutions that does a phenomenal job of investing in mining. And they don't just invest in they invest in companies, they invest in projects, they advance projects. And that's what the story is with this project that you got from our option from them, is that they did a lot of work on this project and they want to see it put into a mine. And so part of your preliminary or part of your deal is that you've got to produce a preliminary economic assessment over the next couple of years to fully earn in your 80%. Did I get all that right, John?
Yeah, that's a great summary. And like I think I've said a few times recently, but it's really true. I don't think I'll ever have this opportunity again in my career. This is a polymetallic deposit with a starting resource of 11.4 million tons, a 3% copper equivalent, cross inferred and indicated. This is something that's never been valued in a public company. Like and so really when you see this 99% of the time, well, one, a deposit of that size is usually with a very large junior or a producer. But at the other thing is you have to ask, well, if this was developed by a public company, why is it being sold? Has this been recycled already a few times through the cycles? But really, the strength of SOCOM, which is, as you mentioned, is a private entity financed by Investment Quebec. So it's essentially an exploration arm of the Quebec government, which is really unique to the province of Quebec, but has really outlined what is a very significant starting deposit that has been drilled in the 2018 resource for about 115,000 meters of drilling. And the majority of that is in a warehouse in Val-d'Or. So we're able to benefit and go back and test and and complete some additional assaying, which maybe we'll chat about further. But really, we're starting with an asset, as I said, that's never been valued in a public company, that has been systematically developed by a Quebec, basically a subsidiary of the Quebec government, with the pure need of trying to generate the next mine in Quebec. So we are very fortunate and grateful to be granted this opportunity. And that's why I'm really excited to do things the right way. We're looking at our end goal, working backwards. Now that we're fully funded into 2026, what I think is a very rare thing in this marketplace, but it really speaks to the quality of the asset. And we've been able to attract a world-class team as a result. But our reputation of being prudent managers of capital has allowed us to tie everything together. So we're very excited about the value proposition that we're building and being very uniquely positioned in what is still a tough junior mining market. But we do believe we're really at the turning point where commodity prices are going in a highly inflationary environment. We think that we're really at the cusp of what will be a very exciting market.
I do want to talk about copper and your unique position in it, but you brought something up there that because I have a lot of experience in Quebec, I know the geoscientific talent of Soquium. So a project like this, you could have it in other places, but you might be piecing together a lot of the scientific data, and sometimes it's incomplete. But that's one of the hallmarks of Soquium, is that they are geoscientists. They're a geoscience-driven group. And so you're able to hit the ground running on a project like this. Like, you probably have every piece of core that you can go through, study all the data. That in itself you could have spent millions and millions to get to this page.
Yeah, it's a huge intangible asset that isn't often recognized in the marketplace. But the fact is they assembled a very strong database. They systematically drilled this deposit. So, and as a result, we announced this acquisition in November, and we had 3 drills on the property by the end of February. It's only because of the quality of the data that SOCOM and the targeting that they did outline. So really, I tip my hat to the province of Quebec and Investment Quebec and SOCOM for having programs like this. I just had the opportunity, and I just got back from a conference in New York where I was presenting alongside the Quebec government and SOCOM and Investment Quebec, really highlighting the benefits and opportunity that lies in Quebec. But again, I guess to your question, the strength of the database that we inherited allowed us to track the financing, scale up as quickly as we could. So I really will always be grateful for the opportunity that we did get in them awarding us the option agreement at B26.
Well, you really got a great group of work to launch yourself from. And part of that's in your news release. It shows the resource, it shows where you've drilled. And one of my questions was going to be that a lot of your drilling is inside that envelope that's fairly close to surface. That's the resource. It's still open below that. But so the focus is you got to go in there and get tighter spacing on your drill density so that you can then be ready for the preliminary economic assessment. But you're also doing some step out drilling that caught my attention. Why don't you tell us about that dual focus, John?
Yeah, so really Q1 has been focused on where's the low-hanging fruit in this deposit, and how do we first generate value for shareholders cost efficiently? Because let's face it, the blue sky potential is at depth. SOCOM drilled this down to 850 meters vertical, and they intercepted roughly 1.4% copper over 40 meters and a high grade core of 5% over 7 meters. And that has no down dip drilling. It's open between about 200 to 300 meters up dip, but that's the that's where there's significant blue sky potential, but that's 1,150-meter hole. That's expensive drilling. So we took a step back. And we really looked at where's the opportunity in Q1. Where we identified that was the 2018 resource was pretty much solely an underground deposit. It made sense at the time, given half of today's commodity prices, a high grade vertical core of this deposit. But we saw the opportunity to test an open pit to complement this high grade underground, given that the nearby Sal Bay mine, which is 7 kilometers to the northwest, produced over 53 million tons of similar polymetallic material. That was an open pit that ramped into underground. So that's where we saw the vision. We looked at the mineralized envelope and the fact that even SGS identified an additional 10,000 meters of drilling within the bulk tonnage disseminated zone that needed further assaying. So really, to summarize it, Q1 we drilled 13,500 meters, 13,500 meters of drilling. Focus in the first 300 meters vertical. We were successful in the western extension drilling, which is quite exciting, identifying a new potential northwestern direction of the mineralization that's had no historical drilling. We've extended in our latest press release the eastern lens 75 meters to the east with a very strong metal factor hit. But we've also, as you mentioned, we've infilled what has been a 50-meter centers resource to better define some of the high grade plunges of this system. So this is all to test the open pit, better define high grade lenses, better model these lenses so that when we start to drill at depth, we can ensure that we have the best information that we can have to increase our hit ratio at depth. So this has all been to set the stage, test the first 300 meters vertical. We've been successful with better defining the high grade lenses with infill. We've extended both directions of the deposit, but now we're going phase 2, which is an additional roughly 17,000 meters of drilling that's funded to drill the rest of the year. That will focus on high priority within the first 300 meters vertical, but a lot of that will focus on the drilling at depth. And that's where we see this deposit having the potential to not only be 11.5 million tons, which it is today, but really to be a 20 to 30 million ton resource, which is what will really get this on people's radar. So what you'll see over the next month is we're going to define a very clear phase 2 drill plan that shows the current model, where we see the plunge of the system, and where specifically we're going to drill and hope to develop this tonnage upside. Because if we're able to paint a good picture and drill against it, I think the market will start to value us ahead of where the drill bit is as of today. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of drilling to be done at depth, but that's more expensive drilling. So we wanted to try to manage of where we can deliver cost efficiently, but also increase the odds of hitting at depth. Just one more point on my long tangent, but we were about halfway through a property-wide density geophysical survey, and that's something that we're combining in with our drilling efforts. The EM geophysics on this property, given the amount of overburden, is noisy. So density, given the change in density between the higher sulfide-rich zones and the host mafic rock, we believe that survey will go down to 600 meters vertical. So we believe that will help with vectoring the extensions of the system to the west, but also identify some other parallel potential lenses or other lenses uptrend or on the property as a whole. So I'll pause there for your questions, but we're just excited about everything that's underway.
You got me really pumped up because at heart I'm an exploration guy. And so let's go step by step here. So folks, what John is describing there is you've got an envelope of, let's say, going down 350 meters. And how you see the distribution of the metals inside of that gives you an indication of where to go deeper. And so if you're going to spend the money to go deeper, you want to increase your probability of success. Those are not cheap holes. So if you want to have a high confidence level that you're going to hit when you go deeper. Did I get that part right? On the resource and around the resource and deeper of the resource.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I guess we are employing other methods with geophysics that is more cost efficient than just drilling these targets to basically pull all the tools together that
Well,
gives
that
us the
was my
best shot.
second. That was my
Yeah,
second
I
subject.
apologize. I'm jumping the gun.
You jump in the gun, and I don't mind that because I can feel the enthusiasm. Um, Now, the historical geophysical work that you're using, I imagine that it was wider space lines and not good depth penetration and resolution. So are you guys going in there with tighter line spacing and deeper resolution? So maybe some of this noise that you saw with the historical geophysics is more able to model things, not just on the resource, but around the resource as well.
Yeah, so the gravity survey has never been done on the project in its history. So this is a brand new tool that we're using at the project. But we have widely spaced lines across the entire property as a whole because B26 has a strike length of about 1.6 kilometers. But I think the market I think sometimes forgets that we have a larger 6 kilometer trend between Sal Bay and B26. So we're covering the entire property with wider space lines, but that B26 corridor is going to have additional lines to fill the larger spacing so that there's tight spacing amongst the corridor that we believe that we will have responses in. But then if we get responses outside of that, then we'll go back to those specific areas on the wider grid and tighten it up so that we're able to do a cost efficient first pass. But any area that has a response, we go back and really put additional lines in the grid to better define for future drilling.
So when you're using gravity, one of the things that you need is a contrast between the mineralization and the country rock around it. If there's a good contrast, then you get this big gravity anomaly that can be very well defined if there is a healthy contrast between the density of the ore body or the deposit and your country rock. Have your geophysicists found that that's the case?
Yeah, I've actually was looking at our density. So as part of our drilling, we're doing density measurements on all of our mineralized zones. So that's not a lot of times a real sexy part of our exploration, but it's something that's meaningful because you're able to reflect those specific densities in the resource, but also it's good to then overlap with the property wide survey. So I was looking at the measurements yesterday, and in the sulfide rich zones, we're up at a density factor of about 3.6, 3.7. But then the copper gold stringer zones were down to a density factor of about 2.8. And then the host rock is then down from there. So the massive sulfide zone has a clear density signature that we believe will be responsive to this survey.
Wow, that's cool because now not only can you see the larger, but you can see the stringers inside of it that carry
Mhm.
higher grade.
Yeah, exactly. So
That's
it's
awesome. Well, I know a bit about gravity because I spent a good portion of my career in diamond exploration, and have sometimes it works really good because there is a big contrast between a kimberlite body and the country rock around it. So they will stick out like a sore thumb. And so it sounds like you that 3.8 and that's going to be quite a significant contrast between your country rock.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, VMSs occur in pods.
Yes.
So on this contact, you have the Cell Bay mine, you have B26, you have our gold project at B14 Beschefer. So this is a highly mineralized system. And like my technical team could do it much better justice, but the type of alteration that we're seeing in the system is a sign that you see at some of the largest deposits in the Abitibi. So that's why we're very excited to look at, is there another B26 within the property limits? That is yet to be properly tested, and that's why we think that these geophysics could be a material development if we get a good response outside of the main deposit.
Well, I'll give a crack at it because volcanogenic massive sulfides are very much like kimberlites. They're both volcanogenic events, and they're both known to occur in clusters. One of the problems in a cluster is trying to figure out, well, which one is the ones you want to go after, because you can have a lot of geophysical anomalies, but you need to sort of have a signature, if you will. And I imagine that one of the things your geophysical team will do is to overlay the drill hole data onto the geophysical anomaly that will give you a very strong signature, if you will, for your regional exploration.
Yeah, exactly. We have sort of a cheat sheet that we're able to take the signature of B26 and then use that for extensions of B26, but also to compare that signature uptrend for isolated standalone targets that we're able to include in our regional drilling. Because if we're able to make a discovery outside of B26, then that's really the adds to the blue sky potential outside of the large scale growth potential that we think is there at B26. So it's just part of the many pieces that we're working on behind the scenes that we're going to bring together with a very clear growth strategy for phase two.
Well, and that's not sort of pie in the sky arm waving. These volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits are known to occur in clusters. There's a higher probability that there's more there than there's not more there. And so that gets me excited about what you're doing, and the deposit you already have gets me excited, and being open all over the place and finding that high grade has a way of fixing issues in the mining business. So good on the team there for the great work that they're doing, John.
Well, I appreciate that. And maybe a question you're following would have is why hasn't it been found to date in this area? It's because compared to the Cadillac break, there's larger amounts of overburden in this district. So we don't have the benefit of outcropping on surface. But at the same time, the western side of the B26 deposit only has about 15 meters, which within a strong open pit scenario is manageable. So the reason why there hasn't been more discoveries is that overburden, but we do have the tools to sort of take the success at B26 and screen the project and taking on riskier drilling while we are focused on the B26 project. So we really do have a unique advantage to make the next discovery within the B26 property. But that's why there hasn't been as many discoveries in this camp versus the Cadillac break.
I never worry about that sort of stuff, John. I've got enough war wounds on me, having seen projects that are looked at, and on average, it takes about the seventh group on a project before a mine is found, if there is a mine there. And so I never look and say, well, why did those other six guys not find it? That's really irrelevant to me if the seventh
Yeah.
guy finds it. And the work SOQUEM has put you guys in a great position. I know we're getting close on time here, John, but I wanted to talk to you a bit about copper. I've been a bull on copper for many years, but my difficulty is finding a lot of good copper exploration stories and development stories, and you've got both of those covered of where you're going over the short term. And what I find is that if you look over the last 10 plus years, the discoveries have fallen right off a cliff. And during that time, that means that there's not enough projects going into the development stage. And so not only is the cupboard for exploration bare, but the cupboard for development projects is bare. And this is happening at a time when we need more copper for AI, cloud computing, crypto, electric vehicles, alternative energy sources. We've got aging power grid problems in all the developed countries. We're going to need a lot of copper, and there just isn't enough of that in those phases that I'm talking about. and there is some mergers and acquisitions happening, and all of the major mining companies, like the one that's really on the plate right now is Anglo and BHP. BHP isn't after everything else Anglo has; they just want the copper.
Yeah.
And so you're really in quite a special position, John, because there's just not enough exploration, not enough development. There's more need for copper. Why don't you touch on some of that? I ranted for not long enough.
No, no, you're completely right. And I think there's two factors. It's the supply demand, but also where's your copper coming from? Because 50% of copper production comes from areas of political instability. So you look at Panama, we've just had one of the largest copper mines in the world be essentially nationalized. So that's where I think jurisdictions like Quebec, where you actually have supportive government partners to facilitate development, are good deposits in those regions will be at a premium, in my opinion. Part of the reason why we're excited to be exploring there. But really, like the supply demand case for copper is very strong. We're in a deficit of copper supply this year, but that's going to grow by at least 30% out to 2030. And there's going to be a huge supply demand imbalance by that point. But at the same time, during that period, copper is going to become that much more important. And if 50% of the supply is from countries with political instability, how much of that is going to be taken offline, or how much of that is going to be constrained to use within the country that it's produced? So I think we're at a perfect storm where you have the supply demand case that's clearly there with, as you mentioned, AI, EV, decarbonization, the fact that we just need a significant amount of infrastructure investment, a lot of which is supported by copper, combined with the fact that the exploration space has seen huge underinvestment. The majors have not been aggressive in their exploration budgets. The M&A cycle has been lacking, and you're now starting to see some M&A pick up, which I think will only increase. But really, I think it's setting up for the perfect storm. And as we speak, copper is breaking out because I think it's recognizing the factors that are here at play today. So that's what makes us both excited to be operating with a rare polymetallic high grade deposit like B26, but also that we're in such a good jurisdiction like Quebec, because it's exploration is a risky business, whether you have grassroots or advanced stage exploration. But you could make a discovery, we could prove B26 to be 20 to 30 million tons. But if we weren't in a solid jurisdiction, that could be all for nothing if we aren't able to benefit from that hard work alongside our shareholders, and if we don't have support of government and partners from all stakeholders that will allow us to recognize that value. So that's part of the reason why we're so excited about copper, but also important to note where that copper is coming from.
Well, some of that analysis about the supply crunch coming, it was done even before artificial intelligence really burst on the scene in the last 6 months or so. To do a Google search, I think it's 10 to 50 times the energy needed to do an AI search. And everybody's trying to get into AI. So I think that crunch is a lot closer than people think. And you brought up a point there that really stands out to me in the problem with the underinvestment in exploration. What you guys have been able to pull off here with this project is you're getting a project from a group that probably maybe does exploration work better than major mining companies. And you have it now for you guys to run with the ball now. They've handed you the baton, and now you guys can run with it, and you don't have things pulling you back from the quality of the work that was done in the past.
Yeah, no, exactly. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been able to attract a world-class advisory team and exploration team in the process. And we have a representative that was the senior vice president of exploration at Kirkland Lake Gold that oversaw development at Detour into one of the largest mines in Canada. And we have a gentleman that was with Eldorado that oversaw the Lamaque construction from PEA to commercial production in 18 months. But those individuals aren't interested unless I think it's really a significant opportunity. And I think that that's the start of additional advisors or board members joining the company. So we're really looking to round out our team to really look forward, because now I'm trying to look at the goal, and what is the goal of the company? The goal of the company is to build a resource that is saleable to a major. And we need to look at, well, what's the size that they would be looking at? We think it's in the 20 to 30 million ton range where this is seriously considered as a development prospect. So we're looking at that target, the significant footprint of the deposit today, and then looking at we're working with our external resource consultants. What is inferred spacing? What's indicated spacing? And really trying to look at the end goal, work backwards, combining geophysics, combining all the tools that we have to get the most out of the $22 million that we've raised over the last 5 months. We've done that with no warrants. So there's limited overhang, well, no overhang on the stock. So our stock will be responsive to the many catalysts that we have to outlay over the rest of the year and 2025, because we are fully funded into Q1 of 2026, which is very unique compared to the landscape that we're in today.
Well, you've got a unique project, and I think that's why you've been able to finance yourself in a unique way that's been challenging over the last 6 months to 2 years. And I think it speaks volumes about the quality of your project. And John, I really appreciate that you took me up on the offer to come on the show, because I'm leaving this with a lot of enthusiasm for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to joining you again, because there's a lot of, we'll probably have weekly or at least news every 2 weeks for the foreseeable future. So
Wow.
lots of catalysts for investors or anyone to follow. I think we have more drill results out from B26. We also drilled our Beshford Gold project, which is 7 kilometers away from B26. We'll have news out from there. We have the results of our gravity survey, and then really how we tie everything together. So the summary of phase one, what it means for the project, what are we doing with that information, and what is our drill strategy for phase two? Because when we start drilling again in about a month's time, I don't think we'll stop for the rest of the year. So that we really want to take a pause, connect what we've learned in phase one, show the bigger picture to our following so that everybody can digest and follow our progressions for the rest of the year. And really tying together the big picture now. We've been the team's done a great job to get to where we are today, but to move it to the next level is a different value proposition. And that's what we need to outline for our following, for analysts that are now following the story, for the larger institutional financing that we want to attract, that we think will see us really move from 20 to 30,000 meters a year to 50 to 100. We think the project has that potential, but we need to get credit for our shareholders at every step of the way. We don't want to rush too fast, but we need to deliver value. And I think bringing all this together to show a phase two approach, I think will be really show the hard work that has been done behind the scenes and the upside for the project.
That's an awesome way to close it. I'm going to close off. It'll just take me a minute here, John.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot again. There you go, folks. In Abitibi Metals, I think you should do your homework, because these kind of projects don't come along very often, especially in a jurisdiction like Quebec. To have the high grade, to have the good thick intersections, you've got a resource that's growing there. Great work has been done on the project in the past. This gives them an opportunity to launch from there. And yeah, do your homework on the company. I got a feeling we'll be doing more of these in the not too distant future. On that note, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.